Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely paradigm-shifting framework from Dr. Bichara Sahely's recent academic white paper toward life-coherence wisdom. We're going to unpack exactly how we figure out what actually matters in a world that is practically designed to distract us. Look, if you've ever felt completely drowning in a stream of information, but somehow totally starved for actual meaning, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to map out a really clear, structured path to understand exactly how our attention gets hijacked and, more importantly, how we can finally get it back.
Okay, let's dive right into this. You hear it everywhere today, right? We're living through a meaning crisis. People feel unmoored, isolated, just exhausted by the modern world. And hey, that exhaustion, it's incredibly valid. But Dr. Sahely argues that the meaning crisis is really only half the story. The real, underlying issue isn't just a lack of meaning. It's actually a crisis of misrelevance. Because think about it, meaning can actually be found in some pretty terrible things. People find meaning in revenge, in toxic competition, in pure, unadulterated outrage. So the deeper question we need to ask is whether the meanings we're attaching ourselves to actually serve life or if they're quietly destroying it.
And that brings us to a really core concept here, misrelevance. So misrelevance happens when our systems organize our attention, our emotions, and our measurements around the completely wrong signals. Signals that do not protect, repair, or expand what Dr. Sahely calls life capacity. It makes sense if you think about it. Our society takes things like GDP growth, a hospital's clinical throughput, or a social platform's engagement metrics, and makes them feel like life or death urgent. Meanwhile, the actual conditions that allow human life to flourish, rest, deep connection, unpolluted ecosystems, basic dignity, those get pushed right into the background noise.
So, here's our roadmap for The Explainer. We'll be looking at the crisis of misrelevance, the living triad, 3 tests for wisdom, the traps of system capture, and finally, wisdom as repair.
Starting off with Section 1, the crisis of misrelevance.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how our modern society is absolutely brilliant at generating signals, but we've become terrible at discerning which of those signals actually deserve to organize our lives. We constantly confuse intelligence with wisdom. Intelligence is all about optimizing an objective, right? It solves problems brilliantly within a set frame. But wisdom? Wisdom steps back and asks if the objective itself is actually life-coherent. Let me give you an example. A corporation can be unbelievably intelligent at maximizing quarterly profits, streamlining supply chains, and targeting ads. But if it achieves all of that by strip mining the ecosystem and completely burning out its workers, well, it's highly intelligent but entirely unwise. Basically, wisdom is intelligence made answerable to life.
And here's a perfect everyday example of misrelevance in action. Say a sensational headline drops, like, a celebrity's minor wardrobe malfunction. It hits your feed and instantly it feels way more urgent and noticeable than the slow, quiet ecological collapse happening in the background. Our modern systems literally hijack our attention by making shocking but totally trivial things feel incredibly important. It proves a really vital point you should take away from this. Just because something is salient, just because it pops out at you, does absolutely not mean it's actually important.
Moving on to Section 2, the living triad.
So, if our attention is constantly getting hijacked left and right, how should we process what matters? Well, Dr. Sahely pulls from 3 leading thinkers to explain how we process relevance. First, Catherine Pyle Kaufman shows that our bodies register threats and nourishment through emotion. Emotion literally senses our viability. Second, Humberto Maturana shows that our relationships open up different worlds of action. For instance, a classroom rooted in fear operates in a totally different world than one rooted in trust. And third, John Vervaeke shows that our cognition self-corrects to realize relevance and find actual insight. So it's emotion, relation, and cognition, all working together to tell us what is actually relevant to our survival and our flourishing.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds into the 3 tests for wisdom.
Knowing how we process relevance is great in theory, but since we know our emotions and our cognition can be easily tricked, we need practical tools. Our first tool here is the life value test, drawn from John McMurtry. The question is, does this expand or reduce life capacity? I want you to actively apply this to the systems around you right now. Think about your workplace, for example. Does the way it operates actually grow human potential, health, and dignity? Or does it just consume your margins, leaving you completely burned out at the end of the week? If a metric or a policy improves the company's bottom line but reduces the life capacity of its people, it fails the wisdom test. Straight up.
The second tool is the anti-violence test, drawn from Johann Galtung. Ask yourself, what harm is hidden or normalized here? So often, cultural narratives make structural violence look completely normal, or even just inevitable. We look at poverty, we look at chronic burnout,
environmental degradation, and society essentially tells us, well, that's just the cost of doing business, or that's just a lack of personal resilience. Wisdom requires us to actively spot that harm, the harm the system is actively trying to hide or brush under the rug.
And the third tool is the discernment test. What is being protected, sacrificed, or made ultimate? This one helps us spot what's called captured ultimacy. Keep an eye out for when a massive institution, maybe it's a hospital, a university, or a branch of government, protects its own reputation at the sacrifice of the very people it's supposed to be serving. When an institution decides that its own survival and its PR spin are more ultimate than basic human dignity, it has fallen into profound misrelevance.
Which brings us to Section 4, the traps of system capture.
Because let's be honest with ourselves, even with the best intentions, our systems fail, and often they fail spectacularly. And this brilliantly illustrates 6 major failure modes that ground all this abstract philosophy into the very real frustrations we deal with every day. We already talked about salience capture, the breaking headline effect, but look at affective capture. That's when pure grief gets twisted and hardens into an endless loop of revenge. Or metric capture, like when a hospital prioritizes the sheer volume of patients seen, their clinical throughput, over the actual messy, unquantifiable process of healing. Algorithmic capture is your social media feed prioritizing raw engagement, outrage and clicks, over meaningful attention. Sacred capture is when ideological dogma just steamrolls over basic compassion. And finally, institutional capture, when blindly following a bureaucratic procedure suddenly becomes more important than honoring human dignity.
And finally, Section 5, Wisdom as Repair.
Listen, if we just stop at recognizing these failures, we're just going to become cynical. True wisdom isn't just sitting back in an armchair diagnosing the world's problems. It has to be completed in action. So the crucial point is this life-coherence wisdom cycle. This is your actionable, step-by-step procedure to actually evaluate and fix the systems you live in. First, sense viability. Really listen to what your body and your emotions are telling you about a situation. Second, notice salience. Ask yourself why certain things are suddenly grabbing all your attention. Third, name the frame. Identify the narrative the system is trying to push on you. Fourth, reveal harm. Use those tests we just learned to find the hidden structural damage. And finally, step 5, repair. Take non-coercive action to restore life capacity.
As you actually begin that repair process, there's a vital rule to remember. Wisdom acts by repair, not domination. And wow, is this ever important for our highly polarized world right now? True wisdom doesn't seek to control, crush, or just silence the opposing side. Domination just imposes order by reducing someone else's agency. Repair, on the other hand, actively seeks to restore the margins, rebuild trust, and reconstruct the conditions that allow life to naturally flourish for everyone involved.
We're going to wrap up today's explainer with this incredibly powerful quote directly from the white paper. Wisdom is becoming less capturable by what does not serve life. I really want to leave you with that provocative thought. Take a hard look at your own daily routines, the media you're consuming, the metrics you're frantically chasing at work. Are you allowing your attention and your precious energy to be captured by things that do not serve life? I challenge you to use this framework. Question what truly matters, protect your margins, and finally step out of the misrelevance trap. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through Dr. Sahely's incredible work.